DAJJAL, the Ahmadiyya Muslim belief. Prophet Muhammad warned, "I have told you so much about the DAJJAL that I am afraid you may not understand. You may not recognize it." Unfortunately, this worry materialized, and for the most part, Muslims have grossly misunderstood the prophecy of the DAJJAL, which was a crucial prophecy and a great warning. Now, let me try to explain. The Holy Prophet gave the prophecy of the DAJJAL as a sublime prophecy, as a sublime metaphor and parable. And of course, we see these metaphors and parables in different divine books and in the Holy Quran as well. However, Muslim scholars have taken the DAJJAL to literally be some kind of supernatural, one-eyed monster who will wreak havoc in the earth and have a final battle with Jesus. Ahmadis don't believe this. The reality is much deeper. The DAJJAL, which means the great deceiver, were those nations, ideologies and people who would take the world away from Allah, away from true religion, away from Islam, and in fact attack Islamic teachings and ultimately lead to faithlessness. Now, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam, who we believe to be the promised Messiah, said that the DAJJAL were none other than the Christian missionaries who during the colonial era were converting scores and scores of Muslims, especially in India, to Christianity. In fact, that's why the Prophet ﷺ said that Jesus would break the cross, a metaphor for breaking and dismantling Christian ideology and doctrine, which would be widespread and rampant during that era. The other jaw of the DAJJAL were to be the European philosophers who would ultimately lead the world to disbelief and atheism. Of course, we see the effects of that all across the world today. So the DAJJAL isn't some kind of fantasy or some monster. Rather, satanic ideologies, new satanic ideologies pushed by nations and people originating from the West that will sweep the world like never before and affect Muslims too. Now, the details of the DAJJAL mentioned by the Holy Prophet ﷺ in the Ahadith point towards its identification. So for example, the Prophet ﷺ saying that the DAJJAL would be blind from the right eye signified that these nations would be spiritually blind. They wouldn't have the spiritual eye. And the gorging left eye pointed towards their love and engrossment of wealth and materialism. Now, do we really believe that the DAJJAL will have a gigantic donkey in which people will sit, whose ears will be 40 cubits apart, who will roam the clouds, who would eat fire? Of course not. This was a very accurate metaphor for modern day transport systems like aeroplanes, the steam train, and like modern day trains. And of course, these were invented and used by Christian nations first. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ said that the DAJJAL will pass by wasteland, barren land, and order it to take out its treasures. And it will do so, like the Prophet said, like the swarming of bees. Of course, this was a very profound indication, a prophecy to the discovery and control of oil, which was found in barren lands, i.e. deserts. And of course, we all know this was harnessed by Western nations first. The DAJJAL was to kill someone and bring him back to life. This pointed towards modern day medical procedures like surgery, in which it literally looks like someone has died. The DAJJAL would only give food to those people who follow it. This is a clear indication to how Western nations have controlled the world through their wealth and sustenance, especially in Muslim countries. Now, arguably, the greatest and the most clear indication for the identification of the DAJJAL was given by the Holy Prophet ﷺ when he said that if you want to be protected from the DAJJAL, then you must recite and memorize the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf and then the last 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf. And in other narrations, he said to recite the whole surah over the DAJJAL. Now, what does this surah, what do these verses speak of? They speak of Christian nations who started off religious but ended up drowning in materialism and the love for this world. Honestly, the proof is in the pudding. Now, these are just a few descriptions, a few details. And Ahmadi Muslims for well over a century have described the prophecy of the DAJJAL with great depth. And historically, the Ahmadi Muslim explanations for the DAJJAL were labeled as heresy, as blasphemy. However, today, slowly but surely, Muslim scholars are echoing those very same Ahmadiyya Muslim explanations which they had labeled as blasphemy. For example, the Dajjal, its relation to technology and science, the reality of the donkey and transport systems, so on and so forth. But these scholars still have some way to go. So if you as a Muslim want to be protected from the Dajjal, then it's essential we deeply ponder over and think over the prophecy so that we identify who the Dajjal really is. After all, the Holy Prophet ﷺ had warned that he feared Muslims would not understand the Dajjal.